Tonight's case draws us into a faux alpine Manhattan hotel where a terrified woman, a missing VIP ledger, and a trail of very real deaths pull one relentless investigator into a web of secrets and snowbound lies. As you settle in, tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the Secret of the Tyrolean Inn. At exactly 2 minutes past 11, just as I was deciding whether I could get away with one more ginger ale without Wolfe staging a nutritional intervention at breakfast, the phone at the brownstone rang with the kind of nervous insistence that belonged in a melodrama. I was alone in the office, the lights low except for the desk lamp throwing a buttery glow over Wolfe's stacks of reference books. Fritz had retreated downstairs after reminding me that civilized men did not drink fizzy beverages at bedtime, which only strengthened my resolve to do so. The bell shrilled again. I picked up the receiver with the smoothness of a man who has never once been grateful for late-night calls. Nero Wolfe's residence, I said. Archie Goodwin speaking. If this is a salesman, I warn you, I bite. What I got in response didn't belong to a salesman. It was a woman's voice, young, faintly accented, crisp as a pressed napkin at the Waldorf. Mr. Goodwin, is this Mr. Goodwin? That depends, I told her. If you're conducting a survey, I'm Sven the incompetent. If you need help, I might reconsider. She didn't laugh. In fact, the silence on the line gave me the impression she was pressing her hand against the mouthpiece to keep her breathing quiet. I need consultation, she whispered, immediately, before someone dies. Well, that woke me up quicker than a bucket of ice water. Slow down, miss. Adele Rassner. Her voice shook on the second syllable. There is no time. I work at the Tyrolean Inn on East 46th. Please listen carefully. I think someone has stolen. There was a faint rustle on her end, a gasp. Then hurriedly, he's watching me. Who is? Miss Rass. I didn't get to finish. She gave a short, terrified cry, cut off sharply, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a good 3 seconds because humans occasionally need to confirm reality before informing their employer. Then, with the resignation of a man about to get blamed for the weather, I set the receiver down. Right on cue, the soft hum of the elevator announced Wolfe making a personal appearance. This was never a good sign. Wolfe only descended at night if a major client had arrived without appointment. The building was on fire. Someone had disturbed his reading. He appeared in the doorway, majestic as a disgruntled emperor in a quilted maroon silk robe. His eyes narrowed at me, as though I had planned the phone call as a practical joke. Archie, he said, in a tone normally reserved for sinners caught in the act. Good evening, sir, I replied. Or good night, or bad night. Pick whichever fits. Wolfe advanced into the room, each step broadcasting annoyance at gravity for compelling him to move. Why was the telephone permitted to ring twice? I was contemplating ginger ale, I said. A momentary lapse in vigilance, but I made up for it by answering on the second ring instead of the fifth. Phooey. He lowered himself into his chair with a sigh heavy enough to register on a seismograph. Report. I gave him the summary. A frightened woman, cultured accent, assistant manager at a place called the Tyrolean Inn. Wolfe lifted an eyebrow at the name. Tyrolean? Apparently we now have themed hotels for people who miss the Alps, I said. Give it a year and there'll be one modelled after the pyramids. The staff can greet you by swinging brooms like incense burners. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, perhaps deciding whether homicide or resignation would be more restful. Proceed. I told him what she'd said. Consultation, immediate danger, someone possibly watching her, and the call cutting off. When I'd finished, Wolfe opened his eyes again, and the glare he gave me could have browned toast. And what, he asked pointedly, do you propose to do with this? Well, I said mildly, I thought I'd start by asking if you'd ever heard of the Tyrolean Inn, or Alp-themed panic calls from young European women. That is not what I meant. Wolfe tugged irritably at the belt of his robe. If you believe the young woman's life is in danger, why did you sit here narrating events to me instead of contacting the police? Because, sir, I told him, you have made it clear that this establishment does not summon Inspector Kramer after midnight without a corpse, a subpoena, or both. Wolfe clenched his jaw, which was always a privilege to witness. Nonsense. Is it? Because last time I called Kramer at night, you didn't speak to me for a whole day. Fritz tried to slip me sympathy sandwiches in the hallway. Wolfe harumphed, which conceded nothing but admitted everything. We know nothing of substance. You have no description of the threat, no comprehension of her surroundings, no— She said someone stole a list, I cut in, or tried to, and that someone might die because of it. At the word list, Wolfe grew very still. That was his version of a gasp. Lists made him prickly. Lists suggested organization, intention, and items of interest that people killed for. He drummed his fingers once on the arm of the chair. A list, he repeated. Of what? She didn't get that far, I said, but she sure wanted us involved, or you, rather. My charm doesn't attract midnight calls. Wolfe's eyes slid toward me. Your charm attracts chaos. I grinned. I consider that part of my job description. Before Wolfe could reply, the door from the hallway opened silently and Fritz appeared, carrying a small tray with a chilled ginger ale. He set it on the corner of Wolfe's desk, gave me the expression of a parent who knows a child will misbehave anyway, and vanished. I took the ginger ale because refusing Fritz's offerings was somewhere between immoral and unsafe. Wolfe watched me sip it as though I were consuming contraband. Archie, he said slowly, I will not have you gallivanting through Manhattan tonight on the strength of a disconnected call from a hysterical woman. She didn't sound hysterical, I corrected. She sounded terrified. People sometimes confuse the two. He waved this off. It is of no import. Something frightened her. But we lack data. You will proceed to this Tyrolean inn in the morning at a civilized hour. Civilized meaning after orchid hours, I said. Obviously. I pretended to think. So I knock on their door at 11 and introduce myself as the man she tried to call last night and inquire whether the management has a shortage of missing lists or stalkers. I might get thrown out by a bellhop in lederhosen. If they employ such uniforms, Wolfe murmured, the establishment deserves investigation on aesthetic grounds alone. I chuckled. I'll bring my camera. Wolfe ignored that. You are to behave with discretion and caution. If the woman is alive, locate her. If she is not— He didn't finish, and didn't have to. A tension settled between us, not hostile, but weighted. Wolfe felt responsible for every danger that struck within the radius of my footsteps. Not that he'd ever say so outright. I'll be careful, I said. You will be prudent. That too. Wolfe pressed the tips of his fingers together. This list she mentioned, it is the only element of specificity. Learn what you can, but do not commit us to anything before I assess the nature of the matter. Meaning, don't accept her on as a client. Meaning, do not embroil us with a hotel that may be a front for idiocy. Idiot fronts, I said solemnly, are my specialty. Archie? Yes, sir. He exhaled. Very well. In the morning, after the orchids, you will go. There it was, that slight extra emphasis on you, which translated roughly to, I do not want you walking into an unknown danger alone, but since I cannot walk into it myself, I must tolerate the situation. I'll bring snowshoes, I said cheerfully. You never know when a Tyrolean inn might break out in an avalanche. Wolfe closed his eyes again, not in sleep, but in surrender. Good night. He rose, moved with ponderous dignity to the elevator, and ascended like a retiring monarch. I finished my ginger ale, the last bubbles popping like quiet punctuation marks in the silence. The office felt larger than usual, as if the phone call had stretched its walls. A woman frightened, a stolen list, a themed hotel pretending to be the Alps, the kind of combination that didn't end with lullabies. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I couldn't shake one small, annoying thought. Whoever had been watching Adele Rassner at 11:02 p.m. might still be watching her now. And tomorrow, I'd get to find out. The morning sunlight hit Manhattan with the kind of raw enthusiasm only a city without mountains can muster, which felt fitting since I was headed to a place pretending to have some. I had spent the earlier hours pacing around the brownstone, waiting for Wolfe's orchid hours to end. Wolfe, as expected, communicated solely through grunts, finger flicks, and one regal nod, while I fortified myself with coffee, a clean shirt, and enough good humour to face any establishment that decorated itself with fake snow. At 11:17 a.m., I left the brownstone, drove downtown, and parked in front of the Tyrolean Inn, which looked like someone had taken a perfectly innocent midtown building and force-fed it cuckoo clocks until it confessed to having Alpine ancestors. The facade had carved wooden balconies boasting gingerbread trim, a mural of stylized mountains, and a painted goat with a bell around its neck. I was willing to bet the goat was symbolic of something, though probably not honesty. A doorman in lederhosen gave me a greeting in German that sounded either welcoming or accusatory. I thanked him in English and stepped inside. The lobby made the outside look subtle. Faux snow dusted the tops of wooden beams, and a mechanical sound in the wall did its best impression of distant cowbells. A stone fireplace held artificial logs flickering with electric warmth. 2 waitresses in dirndls whisked by. I felt like a misplaced sausage in a plate of scenery. The receptionist, bowl haircut, pince-nez, tight lips, stared at me as if Manhattan had no right to send me. "May I help you?" he asked in a tone that suggested he hoped he couldn't. "I'm looking for Miss Adele Rassner," I said. "I believe she works here, assistant manager." He blinked. "Miss Rassner is unavailable." Unavailable like she's on break, unavailable like she's on vacation, or unavailable like you're lying? His lips tightened further. "I will get Mr. Stroltz." Marcus Stroltz burst into the lobby like a man whose temper had blown its own horns. Thick shoulders, heavy jaw, thinning blonde hair slicked back with Alpine authority. He wore a cream waistcoat embroidered with Edelweiss, presumably to intimidate tourists. "I am Marcus Stroltz," he announced as though I should applaud. "Who wants Adele?" "I do," I said pleasantly. "Archie Goodwin, representing a mutual acquaintance she phoned last night." He frowned. "She phoned no one." "She did," I said, "at exactly 2 minutes past 11. Your clocks don't run on Tyrolean time, do they?" His nostrils flared. "Absurd. Adele went home early last night. She is unreliable, emotional. She becomes hysterical." There it was, a tidy red herring. I didn't buy it for a second. "Where's her room?" "You may not go there." "Then take me yourself." "I will do nothing of the sort." We glared at each other across several yards of fake Bavarian architecture before I smiled. "Fine, then I'll chat up your staff instead." His voice snapped like a pine log splitting. "You will not." But I already had. The flirty waitress, a brunette with a swing to her step, leaned close as she set a tray down. "Adele," she whispered. "She said she was scared. Someone tried to take something from her. Something important." "Last night?" I asked. "Yes. She left early, but she never arrived home. Her cousin called." She darted a glance around. "Please don't say I told you." I wouldn't dream of it. Following the waitress, bellhop, a kid with big eyes and a bigger heart, added what he'd witnessed, who wrung his hands like a washcloth. "Miss Rassner was crying," he said. "She talked about a list, a secret list. She said someone wanted it." "Who?" "I don't know, but she told me to stay away from her floor." The night clerk, a long, tired man who spoke like every syllable cost him money, contradicted both of them. "She was fine," he said. "Went to her room. I heard nothing." "You always hear something," I told him. "If not with your ears, then with your conscience." He didn't appreciate the joke. On my way upstairs, I encountered the day's official red herring, a suave musician with a violin case and a grin polished by years of performance. "Adele," he said, lifting an eyebrow. "She's probably run off with a lover. Fiery woman, very romantic. You know the type." "I do," I said. "But I don't think she ran anywhere except into trouble." He shrugged, the picture of confidence. Too smooth, too glib, too wrong. I found Adele's room on the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled faintly of pine air freshener and fear. Her door was closed and quiet. I crouched, pretending to tie my shoe, and noted faint scratches around the lock. Thin, clean, deliberate. Somebody had forced it expertly. I sniffed. Not literal, just investigative instinct. Someone had been here who shouldn't have. I didn't break in. Wolfe would have fed me to the orchids. Instead, I memorized every detail and headed back downstairs. Stroltz tried to cut me off with bluster, but I breezed past him and out into the real Manhattan sunlight, which felt like a reward. Back at the brownstone at 12:56 p.m., the elevator hummed softly as Wolfe descended for lunch. I caught him before Fritz announced the meal. "Well?" Wolfe demanded, lowering himself behind his desk, like a baron accepting fealty. "Adele Rassner is missing," I said. "Your boy Stroltz denies the call ever happened, Staff stories conflict and someone forced her lock. Also, there's a musician who thinks she ran off to pursue romance in the Alps. Wolfe grunted. Phooey, romantic delusions. On brand for the decor, I said. I haven't encountered this much fake snow since last winter's window displays. Wolfe scowled. You propose next steps? You want her employment file, I said. You need it, and I can get it the proper way. Ask politely before resorting to less polite methods. Wolfe raised a finger. Professionally, Archie. No burglary. No antics. Who? Me? I'm as gentle as a lamb. If lambs carried revolvers, Wolfe muttered. At 1 o'clock exactly, Fritz appeared, announcing lunch with the solemnity of a judge declaring sentencing. Wolfe rose, and I followed him to the dining room, giving the morning's details another mental sift. We had just begun the roast chicken when the bell rang at 1:18. Fritz reappeared at the doorway. Inspector Kramer is here. Wolfe closed his eyes, slowly, painfully. Bring him in, he said. Kramer entered the dining room like someone resigned to bad news before tasting it. His cigar wasn't lit, rare for him, which suggested seriousness. Wolfe, Goodwin, he greeted us, clipped and flat. Inspector, Wolfe said, you will excuse us. We are at lunch. This won't wait. Kramer took in Wolfe's glare without blinking. Adele Rassner was found dead this morning. The air went still. Even the mechanical clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. How? Wolfe asked quietly. Blunt force trauma. Room looked staged, like she slipped. But she didn't slip. He turned to me. You spoke to her last night. Yes, I said, before someone cut her off. Kramer nodded grimly. Which puts you two in the middle, whether I like it or not. Whether you like it or not, Wolfe echoed dryly, appears to be a frequent refrain. Kramer ignored the jab. I need everything. The call, the timing, the wording, and I need cooperation. You shall have it, Wolfe said. But information flows both ways. I will not be obstructed. Kramer hesitated. Only a beat, but enough to register respect. Fine. You'll get what the lab gets. Just don't start one of your games. Inspector, Wolfe said, voice calm as a winter pond. I do not play games with murder. Kramer grunted. All right, Wolfe. I'll wait for your report. He left without slamming anything, which counted as intimacy by Kramer standards. Wolfe stared at his untouched plate. Archie. Yes, sir? Obtain the girl's employment file, professionally. And if Stroltz refuses? Wolfe sighed. Then we shall see how long he withstands reality. That was as close to a war cry as Nero Wolfe issued before lunch. I stood, ready to return to the streets, but Wolfe waved me down. Finish eating, Archie. One must not go to battle on an empty stomach. I sat again, and as Fritz cleared the plates, I couldn't shake the chill curling around my spine. Someone else now held the missing list, somewhere under the Tyrolean snow. After Kramer had left, following his grim announcement earlier at 1:18 p.m., Wolfe let out the sort of groan usually reserved for the death of a good bottle of Burgundy. I couldn't blame him. The announcement that Adele Rassner was deceased had landed between us like a slab of cold stone. The office felt smaller, tighter, as though the books themselves were leaning closer to hear what we'd do next. Wolfe folded his napkin with slow precision. Archie, he said, tell me everything again. I did, with enough detail to satisfy Julius Caesar, minus the Latin. The part about Adele whispering she'd been watched made Wolfe's brow furrow, which is impressive considering his brows are already substantial enough to form their own committee. When I finished, Wolfe tapped a finger against the desktop. The list. It is the only distinct noun in this matter. If the woman died because of it, then the list is neither trivial nor benign. Could be somebody's grocery notes, I suggested. Flour, sugar, murder. Archie. Wolfe's tone could have curdled cream. The following day, right at 11:58 a.m., Wolfe dismissed me because orchid hours started in 2 minutes and the world would sooner end than Nero Wolfe compromise those. Go, he said, investigate, but legally and prudently. Prudence is my middle name, I lied. By 12:41 p.m. that same day, I returned to the Tyrolean Inn, where the mechanical cowbells were still beating out their cheerful tyranny. The lobby was slightly emptier, though the carved wooden beams continued trying too hard. A waiter in a green vest eyed me with suspicion usually reserved for tax collectors. Marcus Stroltz lumbered into view like a glacier with an attitude problem. "You again," he growled. "I told you, we know nothing." "Well," I said brightly, "I'm here to find that out for myself. I'd hate to misjudge your honesty." The flirty waitress from yesterday caught my eye and shook her head minutely. "Don't push him." "Stroltz blocked my path. You are not permitted on employee floors." "I don't need to be. I'm here as a guest." I reached out, snagged a brochure from a display and waved it. "See? I'm considering booking a weekend of relaxation, fresh mountain air, and maybe a dirndl or two. But first, I want to check on Adele." Stroltz's jaw tightened. "We do not discuss staff with strangers." "Good. Then consider me a concerned acquaintance. Adele phoned us. You lied about that." He stepped closer, breath heavy with last night's schnitzel. "Miss Rassner was unreliable." "Funny," I said. "Unreliable people don't usually get murdered." That froze him. He hadn't expected me to say it bluntly. His eyes flickered, a brief dart of fear he tried to bury under Austrian bluster. "Murder? No, ridiculous." "Absolutely," I said, "ridiculous. So let me talk to the bellhop." The kid appeared behind Stroltz, wringing his hands. "I didn't say anything," he squeaked. "Good," I said, "because I'm about to ask you new questions." Stroltz shot him a look that could have melted glaciers. The bellhop considered his options and chose self-preservation. "Break in," I said. 2 nights ago. Quiet, neat. Someone silenced you about it." I don't know." "Kid," I cut in gently, "I'm not the police. But if you lie to me, I'll have to tell the police I talked to you. And then your boss might have to explain why you lied. See how that snowballs?" He swallowed. "There was something stolen, but not from guests, from inside." "Inside what?" "The private register, the VIP ledger." He bit his lip. "Only Adele handled it. She was scared after someone offered her money for it." "How much money?" "Enough to make her shake." That's when Saul Panzer appeared, materializing the way only Saul could. Silent, neutral, as though he'd been sitting in a carved wooden shadow the entire time. He was wearing his flat cap naturally. "Hello, Archie." "Saul, you're freelancing in fake Austria too?" "Lon Cohen said you were here. I thought I'd check." Stroltz looked between us. "Who is this?" "Maintenance," Saul said deadpan. Before Stroltz could argue, I leaned in. "Take us to Adele's office." "No," he barked. "Yes," I said. "Because we're going either way, you just get to choose whether it's under your supervision." Stroltz must have sensed he was losing ground. He stomped away, muttering German curses, and we followed him up a flight of stairs lined with framed pictures of actual Tyrol, one of which had a suspiciously New Jersey-looking tree in the background. Adele's office was a narrow room smelling faintly of lavender and anxiety. Papers were shuffled, but not by her hand. I checked the trash bin, while Saul pretended to study a painting of a goat. There it was, a torn piece of Tyrolean inn stationery, with 3 letters written in tight block script, MVC. "Clue," Saul murmured. "Or grocery list," I said. But Wolfe's voice echoed in my head. "The list is the only distinct noun." This scrap mattered. I didn't pocket it. Instead, I borrowed a note card from the desk and copied the letters carefully, then returned the scrap exactly where I found it. The bellhop peeked into the office. "I didn't tell you about the bribe," he whispered, "or about the man with the scar." "Scar?" I asked. "On his cheek, thin." He asked about the ledger. "Name?" He shook his head. He didn't give one. Before I could press, Saul touched my arm. "You should go." He was right. The air felt charged. Someone was watching us from somewhere. I made for the exit, but halfway across the lobby, the phone at the front desk rang. The receptionist answered, listened, then looked straight at me. "For you," he croaked. Suspicious, I lifted the receiver. It was Wolfe. Rare. Very rare. "Archie?" His voice was low, tight. "Return immediately." "That bad?" "I dislike the drift of events." "You and me both." "Come home. Prudently." The line clicked dead. Wolfe never said goodbye by phone. He dismissed the conversation like closing a book. Saul gave a small nod. "I'll keep an eye here." "Don't let Stroltz rope you into a yodeling contest," I advised. Saul's mouth twisted, his version of a belly laugh, and then he melted back into the shadows. After completing my investigation and returning from the inn, I got back to the brownstone at 3:04 p.m., well after Wolfe's lunch hour. Wolfe was at his desk, fingers steepled, glaring at the world as though it had personally insulted him. "Well?" he demanded. I reported everything: the break-in, the ledger, the bribe, the torn stationery, the initials, the man with the scar. Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the mention of the VIP register. "That ledger," he said slowly, "is not merely a record of guests. It likely contains transactions, names, arrangements, affairs, debts, and if Miss Rassner died for it, then the ledger is either missing or in someone else's possession." "Someone scared enough to kill for it," I said. "Indeed." Wolfe's protectiveness flared then, subtle but unmistakable. A flicker of concern passed across his usually impassive face, his eyes narrowing with a sharpness that I knew better than to challenge. "You are not to confront anyone else alone," he said, his voice low and steady, a command more than a suggestion. "Then give me a raise, Alpine danger pay." "Phooey." He leaned back. "The killer fears blackmail, or exposure, but he may not know who possesses the ledger now. Which makes him a very motivated man." "Precisely." At 3:27 p.m, the phone rang. I answered. "Archie?" Lon Cohen's voice crackled, carrying newsroom electricity. "You boys are in trouble." "When are we not?" "Rumours are spreading. Word is a well-known private detective," he stressed it, "was contacted before the murder. Your fat boss might hit headlines by evening." "Perfect," I said. He always wanted his name in lights. "This is serious, Archie. Someone's stirring it." "I know." I hung up and turned to Wolfe. "We're famous," I said. "Again." Wolfe shut his eyes and sighed. Confound it. And that was how the scene ended, with Wolfe glowering at reputation, murder, and counterfeit Alpine charm, while outside Manhattan rolled onward like a city that didn't care who carried a ledger, or who died for it. By the late morning, having completed Wolfe's orchid hours, I convinced myself that the only way to take the Tyrolean Inn seriously was to pretend I'd been dropped into an operetta and my life depended on hitting the right notes. So, at precisely 12:29 p.m, I stepped into their dining room for the public luncheon, hoping my presence would prompt someone, anyone, to twitch nervously enough to give the game away. If that failed, I could always enjoy the show. Businessmen sweating into their collars, European expats adjusting their accents depending on who listened, and waitresses balancing plates of schnitzel like they were auditioning for the Vienna Ballet. The dining room had all the charm of a Disneyland chalet run by a man who hated children. Pine panels everywhere, fake mountain vistas painted on the walls, and the distant hum of an electric wind machine meant to simulate alpine breezes. I took a table near the center, good visibility, terrible acoustics, and gave my surroundings a once-over. A group of businessmen in striped suits argued in hushed tones near a corner stall, while a couple of wealthy matrons looked over the dessert menu with the grim concentration of surgeons selecting tools. The nervousness among both staff and patrons was palpable, running under the surface like a tremor you felt more in your bones than the air. My waiter, a blond young man who looked like he'd cry if anyone snapped a breadstick in his vicinity, handed me a menu. "You are alone today, sir?" "Yes," I said. "It's part of my rehabilitation program. I'm learning to socialize with the general public." He blinked. Humor didn't stand much chance in this establishment, so I let him go. Across the room, a distinguished man in his late 50s lifted a wineglass. Victor Marston, wealthy, known for his investments, rumored to have connections in Europe that made him more familiar with vaults than vineyards. He was eating with the precise economy of a man who disliked interruptions, even gastronomic ones. His suit was immaculate, his tie a deep burgundy, and his cufflinks sparkled like they knew secrets. I wasn't here for him specifically, but I wasn't dismissing him either, especially given how anyone with a stake in the missing ledger seemed to be getting nervous enough to sweat through wool. Just as I speared a forkful of something pretending to be goulash, a loud gasp cut across the room. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted. Marston had stiffened, clutching the edge of the table. His face went grey, faster than a cloud rolling in, and then he collapsed sideways, knocking over his wineglass in a neat arc of red that splashed the white tablecloth with the subtlety of a crime scene. People screamed. A tourist from Ohio fainted into her spouse's arms. A waiter dropped a tray. I was already on my feet, pushing through the crowd. Marston lay motionless, his eyes open but unseeing. I checked his pulse. Nothing. The waiter who'd served him hovered beside me, hands trembling like he'd been caught using the wrong fork. "What happened?" he blurted. "If I knew," I muttered, "I'd bottle it and sell it." Then I saw it. On the table beside Marston's untouched bread roll, a folded napkin. 3 letters written in careful block script. MVC, the same initials from Adele's torn stationery. I didn't touch it. I leaned close, memorizing the angle, the ink, the placement. Whoever left it wanted it found. "Make room," a barked voice cut through the din. Inspector Kramer strode in like a man who tolerated death only slightly more than he tolerated Wolfe. Behind him lumbered Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, wearing a permanent scowl that made the carved wooden goats on the wall look friendly by comparison. Kramer's eyes swept the room with rapid-fire precision, finally locking onto me. He marched over, cigar unlit but clenched between his teeth. "Goodwin, you again." "I didn't poison anyone," I said. "I'm eating the same food. If anything, I'm the victim here." "Cut the jokes." He jerked his thumb toward the body. "Why were you here?" "Public lunch. I wanted to see who was nervous." "And now one's dead." "Not my fault," I said. "Unless my face scared him to death, in which case you owe me hazard pay." Kramer ignored that. He crouched to examine the body, jaw tight. "Marston, hell." "You knew him?" "Financial bigwig. Lots of friends. Lots of enemies." He stood and snapped at Stebbins. "Seal the room. Nobody leaves. And for God's sake, keep the reporters outside." The medical examiner arrived at 1:08 p.m. A quick look at Marston's water glass and lips was enough for him to mutter, "Poison." The word rippled through the room like a contagious thought. Kramer glared at me again, not hostile, just professionally exhausted. "Where were you sitting?" "Over there," I said, "eating pasta that might kill me in a different way." "And you saw nothing?" "Just him going down like his stocks hit rock bottom." "And that?" He pointed to the napkin. "I didn't touch it." "Don't," he growled. "We'll print it." One of the businessmen stepped forward. "Inspector, surely this is some kind of accident?" "Man drops dead at lunch with a napkin spelling doom," I said. "Sure. Happens every day." "That's enough, Goodwin," Kramer snapped, not angrily, just trying to maintain control. I took the hint. After Stebbins began questioning the diners, I slipped out with Kramer's curt nod of permission. He didn't like me wandering off, but he also knew Wolfe would want a first-hand report. "All right, Goodwin," he muttered, "go. But Wolfe better not hold out on me." "He won't," I said. "He's allergic to police obstruction." "Don't get smart." I was born that way. He almost smirked. Outside, I breathed in real air instead of theatrical mountain breezes and caught the next cab uptown. At 1:51 p.m., I walked into the brownstone to find Wolfe at his desk, glowering at a dictionary as though it had personally offended him. "You're back early," he said. "Someone died early," I replied, hanging up my hat. "Victor Marston, collapse mid-meal, poison, public scene, flashbulbs, panic." "Confound it," Wolfe muttered. "Tell me." I gave him the blow-by-blow, ending with the folded napkin and the initials. Wolfe sat forward. "Marston's name occurs in the missing ledger." "Yes, which makes this a trend." "Archie," he said sharply, "you must cease inserting yourself at the Tyrolean Inn. It is perilous." "Sir," I said, "I was just eating lunch." "And a man died at your elbow." "Not because of my elbows." He glared. Beneath that glare, though, was the quiet swell of protectiveness he would rather swallow a typewriter than acknowledge. "I will not have you exposed to poison attacks," he said, "or to panic-ridden mobs. You will exercise caution." "I always do." "Phooey." He slapped the bell cord. Fritz appeared with the quiet grace of a man who trained as a ballet dancer before deciding food deserved his devotion. Wolfe ordered beer, allowed now that noon was past, and Fritz went to fetch it. As Wolfe sipped the chilled glass, he frowned. "Someone is eliminating persons connected to the ledger. They fear discovery." "No kidding," I said. "Marston went down like he'd been penciled off a list." "Saul must investigate the other names," Wolfe declared, "and Fred, and Ori, quietly. I want backgrounds, associations, liabilities." "You're assembling a cavalry," I said. "You know what that means?" No, he said irritably. What? That danger pay is officially justified. He snorted. Imbecile. But his tone lacked heat. I typed notes for the record, summarizing the chronology while Wolfe leaned back, digesting both his beer and the problem. At 2:37 p.m. he looked at me. Archie? Yes? You must be prudent. Do not take meals there again. No hardship, I said. Their schnitzel tastes like it was beaten to death twice. He gave the faintest hint of a smile, and as Fritz reappeared with a tray of pastries, his way of stabilizing everyone's nerves, I knew this scene had reached its ritual close. Wolfe would brood, I would type, and somewhere in the Tyrolean inn, someone else was wondering if their name too was on a very fatal list. Be the time noon sunlight filtered through the brownstones' office windows the following day in that lazy Manhattan way, bright but not apologetic, I had already worn a groove in the carpet pacing. Wolfe, of course, was immovable in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes half-closed, as Saul Panzer delivered the kind of report that would have won medals in any civilized country that valued intelligence over bureaucracy. Saul stood near the globe, flat cap in hand, expression neutral as always. It's called the Alpine Circle, he said. A private consortium, unregistered, unofficial, but real enough. I stopped pacing. Sounds like a club where you have to yodel twice before they let you in. Saul didn't blink. Members are all émigrés from Central Europe, most left after the war, some under pressure, financial scandals, import violations, insurance fraud, things that never reached American courts but left marks overseas. Wolfe opened his eyes. Names. Marcus Stroltz, Victor Marston. Saul consulted a small card. Two more, Helmut Reiner and Helena Vorberg, both still in New York. I whistled. Quite the quartet. What do they do besides pretend the Alps are in Midtown? Saul slid his hands into his coat pockets. Money laundering, illegal import schemes. Quiet, very quiet. They needed a neutral headquarters, something charming, something nostalgic. Thus, the Tyrolean Inn. The air felt heavier. Not Alpine heavy, just Manhattan heavy, the kind that meant trouble brewing beneath polished parquet floors. And the ledger, I asked. Handled by Adele Rassner. She kept the private guest and transaction list. The circle trusted her because she wasn't connected to their past, but someone wanted it. Probably someone inside. Wolfe raised a brow. Confound it, of course. I leaned back on the edge of the desk. Someone tried bribing her for access. She mailed something before she died. A parcel. Destination unknown. That's correct, Saul said, according to the postal clerk near the inn. Wolfe sucked in a slow breath. Archie? Yes, sir. Find the bookkeeper. That meant the person who knew more than they were willing to admit, and was terrified because of it. I headed out. At 1:16 p.m., after dodging a carved wooden goat in the inn lobby, I found the bookkeeper's office tucked behind a storage closet full of lederhosen. The bookkeeper, a thin man named Ernst Fischer, sat hunched over an adding machine like he feared numbers would physically attack him. He glanced up with the alarmed eyes of a man who expected either a foreclosure or a firing squad. Yes? Relax, I said. I'm not here to audit you. My name's Archie Goodwin. I'm looking into Miss Rassner's death. He flinched. I told the police everything. You told them what you weren't afraid to say. I pulled a chair over and sat. Adele planned to leave, didn't she? His fingers twitched. I don't know, I cut in gently. But she told you she had a buyer, for the ledger. He looked like I'd stabbed him with a pencil. She said she was tired of being afraid. She wanted out. She said the ledger would buy her freedom. And she didn't tell me more. I didn't want to know. Did she say who the buyer was? No, only that they had money. Money, enough to risk murder. Did she say where she was mailing that parcel? He shook his head. I saw her carrying it. She looked determined and scared. His silence was confirmation. I left without pushing him further. Fear makes people clam up faster than Wolfe at a cocktail party. Back at the brownstone at 2:38, Wolfe was waiting, with hands clasped, head bowed in thought like a philosopher contemplating a ham sandwich. Well? He demanded as I entered. I reported. All of it. Wolfe listened in stony silence, then thumped his palm on the desk. The killer will make another move. Because they don't know where the ledger is, I said. Precisely. He rubbed his chin. We must observe who pressures whom next. When men are cornered, they betray themselves. Or commit violence, I added helpfully. Wolfe gave me a glare. Archie, do not be fatuous. Violence is already a certainty. Fine, I said. But if we're cornering people who run illegal import schemes, I want a hazard pay bonus. A grunt, almost amused, escaped him. Pfui, you will exercise prudence. That was practically affection from Nero Wolfe. Before I could enjoy it, the bell rang at 2:52. Fritz appeared at the doorway. Inspector Kramer, sir. Wolfe growled something in German and waved him in. Kramer entered with a cigar stub between his fingers, not lit, which told me he was thinking harder than usual. He eyed Wolfe, then me, then Wolfe again. All right, he said without preamble. Wolfe, you were right. I nearly applauded. Wolfe looked unimpressed. Naturally. Kramer ignored the barb. Marston's death wasn't random. We searched his home office, found hints of foreign money transfers, nothing explicit but enough to suggest he was keeping secrets. Financial impropriety, Wolfe murmured. He was a member of the Alpine Circle. Kramer frowned. Never heard of it. You have now, Wolfe said. What else? Kramer's jaw worked. We questioned Stroltz again. He denied everything. Too fast, too defensive. He is frightened, Wolfe said. A man with a guilty conscience. Kramer blew out a breath. Look, Wolfe, I don't like this. It's too big, too tangled, and now you're involved. You came to me, Wolfe said. I did, Kramer admitted, because your boy here seems to trip over corpses every time he orders lunch. I have that effect, I said modestly. Kramer shot me a look. Cut the jokes, Goodwin. Wolfe lifted a hand. Inspector, you have something else to say. Kramer hesitated, very unlike him. Yes, if you find something and sit on it, I'll pull a warrant before you can say constitutional rights. Understood? Perfectly, Wolfe said coolly. I have no interest in withholding evidence. Good, Kramer straightened. Because something is going on here, something big, bigger than your usual blackmail cases. I deduced that yesterday, Wolfe said. Kramer's lips twitched, half irritation, half reluctant admiration. Fine, fine, but don't make me regret treating you like a partner. Wolfe inclined his head with the dignity of a king granting audience. I will keep you informed, Inspector. Kramer grunted. All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report. He jabbed a finger in my direction. Goodwin, keep your head down. Always, I said. He left without slamming anything, which meant he respected us, for the moment. When the elevator hum faded, Wolfe shifted his gaze to me. Archie. Yes? We must apply pressure. Contact Saul, Fred and Ori. They are to begin background investigations on all Alpine Circle members. Discreetly. No theatrics. No yodeling either, I said. Is that an explicit instruction? He glared. Archie. Fine, fine. I'll be good. You will be prudent, he corrected. And diligent. And underpaid. Confound it. He reached for the bell cord. Fritz, beer. Fritz arrived with a tray and a chilled glass at exactly 3:10 p.m., setting it down with reverence. Wolfe lifted the glass like a king acknowledging loyal subjects. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You were civil to Kramer. He was civil to me. That's new. Wolfe aimed a look sharp enough to cut fabric. Archie, unless you desire a salary deduction, cease prattling. I grinned. Wouldn't dream of it. The moment settled into something like calm, but it was the kind of calm you see in a snow globe right before someone shakes it, because somewhere out there the killer had realized the ledger was still missing, and someone in the Alpine Circle was getting nervous enough to make another move. The next morning, the brownstone had settled into that deceptive calm it gets just before fate decides to kick the front door in, and I was typing up my notes from the Alpine Circle brouhaha when the doorbell rang at 10:07 a.m. The tone had its usual mild-mannered buzz, but something about the timing made every hair on my neck take attendance. Fritz appeared in the office doorway a moment later, his expression politely inscrutable, the way only a Swiss master of 3 languages and 5 sauces can manage. The postman, Mr. Goodwin. A parcel for Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe grunted without lifting his eyes from the botanical encyclopedia he was pretending not to reread for the 15th time. "Bring it." Fritz set the brown paper parcel on Wolfe's desk, as reverently as if it were a crown jewel. Wolfe eyed it. I eyed Wolfe. Neither of us said it, but we both knew that parcels arriving in the middle of a murder investigation seldom contained summer bonnets. "Archie," Wolfe said, "proceed." I slit the paper open with my pocket knife. The smell hit first, a faint mix of lavender perfume and cigarette smoke that was unmistakably feminine and unmistakably not Fritz's cologne. Beneath the wrappings was a piece of Tyrolean patterned cloth, the exact shade of cheerful alpine red that made me want to yodel or commit arson. Wrapped inside that cloth was a thick leather-bound book, the ledger, the missing VIP ledger. My pulse did a neat little hop, like it had someplace better to be. "Aha," Wolfe breathed, rare excitement from the big man. "Give it here." I placed it in front of him. He opened it with surgical delicacy. The first few pages were neat columns of names, dates, room numbers, and coded notes. But several names had been crossed out in red pencil, long, deliberate slashes, the kind made by a person who knew exactly what they were erasing. I leaned over his shoulder. "Those are Marston's initials there, aren't they?" "Yes," Wolfe said grimly. "Victor Marston, removed, terminated, expunged." "Like a hit list," I said. He didn't argue. We flipped forward. More red slashes. Not many, but enough to show pattern. When we reached the final quarter of the ledger, Wolfe's finger stopped cold. A single entry, small, tight handwriting. MVC. The same initials that had haunted our investigation from the beginning, first appearing on Adele's torn stationery, then on Marston's napkin, and finally etched into the very fabric of the case. They were the key to everything, the same initials that had danced through the shadows of the mystery since the phone call at 11:02 p.m. "Archie," Wolfe said softly, "this is intolerable." "That's one word for it," I said. "Can I offer a few more colourful ones?" "No." He turned another page, inhaling deeply to think, but the sharp breath caught unexpectedly. "Confound it," he sniffed again. "What is that scent?" I leaned closer to the Tyrolean cloth. Adele's perfume, same as when she called, but something else, something under it. I sniffed again. Cologne, masculine, not strong, clean, sharp, maybe citrus. It was faint but real. Someone else had handled this after Adele wrapped it. Wolfe's face darkened. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "Call Inspector Kramer, immediately." That was not a suggestion. That was Wolfe's equivalent of rolling up his sleeves and announcing war. I phoned Kramer's office. Miraculously, he answered himself. "Kramer." "It's Goodwin," I said. "You better get over here." "If this is a joke, it's not. We've got the ledger." Silence then. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't move anything, and don't let Wolfe talk circles around the law." "Impossible," I said. "He talks spirals." At 10:22 the bell rang with the kind of force that suggested a man using 2 fingers and all his repressed frustration. Fritz admitted Kramer and Pearlie Stebbins, who looked like he'd been carved from old police station granite. Kramer stomped into the office. "Where is it?" Wolfe didn't get up, naturally, but he gestured to the desk. "There." Kramer approached like a man investigating a venomous snake. "How the hell did you get this?" "Adele Rassner mailed it," I said. 2 days ago." Kramer's head snapped toward me. 2 days? "Postmark doesn't lie," I said. Stebbins leaned in. "Why'd she send it here?" "Because she trusted us," I said. "Lucky for you." Kramer gave me a glare shaped like a subpoena. "You should have called sooner." "We called the instant it arrived," I said. "Unless you wanted us to predict mail delivery schedules." "Don't get smart." I wasn't trying. Kramer turned his attention to the ledger. "What are these red marks?" "Names," Wolfe said. "Crossed out, terminated. Victor Marston among them." "Well, he's certainly terminated," Kramer muttered. "What about these initials, MVC?" "That," Wolfe said, "is what you must discover, though I suspect we already know whose initials they are." Kramer scowled. "Don't start playing coy with me." "No games," Wolfe said, "but I will require time." "You can have 5 minutes," Kramer snapped. Wolfe glared at him. Kramer met it without blinking. Finally, Wolfe spoke. "Inspector, you will, of course, take possession of the ledger." Kramer blinked, shocked enough to forget his cigar. "What?" "I said," Wolfe repeated, "you may take the ledger, after we copy the relevant pages." "Oh, no, you don't," Kramer barked. "I'm not letting you." "You have no grounds," Wolfe said calmly. "This ledger is not classified government property, nor stolen by us, nor evidence we concealed. It came unsolicited. We contacted you post-haste. You have no warrant to seize our property until it is catalogued." Kramer's jaw worked furiously. Wolfe added, "And if you attempt to withhold information in return, I will—" "Fine," Kramer snapped. "Fine. Make your damn copies. But I'm coming back for the original." "Of course," Wolfe said. It was as close to an amicable conversation as those two ever got. While Wolfe arranged the camera and photostat equipment, he insisted on doing the copying himself because only he was competent enough to align a ledger properly. Kramer stood beside me, arms folded. "Goodwin," he said quietly, this is big." "Yeah, I figured that out when people started dying for table linens." His mouth tightened into something not quite humor but not quite anger. "Keep your boss honest." "I always do." At 10:53 the photostats were done. Wolfe slid the ledger across the desk. "Inspector," he said, "take care. Whoever murdered Miss Rassner and Mr. Marston may have designs on anyone connected to this." "Don't lecture me," Kramer said, but softer than usual. He tucked the ledger into an evidence bag and turned to leave. At the doorway he paused. "Wolfe, Goodwin, thanks." And then he was gone. The room felt oddly still. The ledger gone, but its weight still in the air. Wolfe exhaled slowly. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "You are not to return to the Tyrolean Inn." I almost laughed. "And here I thought you'd send me armed with a yodel." "Archie," he said sharply, "I forbid it." "Then define return," I said helpfully. "Could I circle the block, stand across the street, order takeout?" He stared at me. "You are insufferable." "That's why you keep me." He let out a reluctant grunt, affection disguised as annoyance. "This matter will escalate. We must map the list, chart connections, anticipate the killer's next move." Just then, Fritz appeared in the doorway with a tray. "Gentlemen, coffee." A ritual closure, as sacred to Wolfe as the orchids. He took his cup, sipped and closed his eyes, thinking, calculating, worrying for me more than he'd ever admit. I took my cup too, breathing in the steam. The scent of Adele's perfume still lingered faintly on the cloth lying folded on the credenza. Under it, that faint trace of masculine cologne, a ghost of someone watching, someone moving pieces behind the scenes, someone willing to kill to erase red marks from a ledger. I sipped my coffee. "Sir," I said quietly, "we've stirred up a snowstorm." "No," Wolfe said. "The storm was already here. We have merely opened the window." If there's one thing I've learned in this business, it's that meeting a confidential informant in a hotel designed to resemble the Alps is like trying to conduct espionage in a cuckoo clock. Every decorative carving stares at you, every wooden beam creaks suspiciously, and every waitress in a dirndl glides by as though auditioning for a minor role in an operetta called Murder on the Matterhorn. So, at precisely 11:43 a.m., when I stepped into the Tyrolean Inn's side lounge for a clandestine meeting with Saul Panzer, I felt like the only pine tree in a forest full of papier-mâché. Saul materialized beside a pillar, his flat cap pulled low. "You're late." "Only by 2 minutes," I said. "The mechanical goats delayed me." "I'd complain," Saul murmured, "but the goats listen." We took a quiet corner where a carved wooden eagle looked judgmentally over our shoulders. Saul slipped me a short list. Helmut Reiner is missing, Helena Vorberg is still here, and Stroltz is hostile. "That's all 3 remaining Alpine Circle members," I said. "One vanished, one rattled, one belligerent. We've hit the jackpot." Saul didn't smile, but something in his eyes acknowledged the quip. "Helena asked for privacy. She's in her suite. I cleared the hallway. You can go up." I nodded. "You sticking around?" "Outside the door," he said, "in case she screams or shoots." Comforting. We separated, and I headed upstairs. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in muted red with embroidered patterns, stylized mountains, goats, flowers, the usual Tyrolean motifs that made me want to join a support group for victims of excessive decor. Helena's suite was at the far end. I knocked lightly. The door opened a crack, then wider. Helena Vorberg stood in a soft grey dress reminiscent of a Vienna winter, elegant, wrapped in muted luxury, with eyes holding that luminous tremble you see in people who've already attended their own funeral in their minds. "Mr. Goodwin," she whispered. "That's right," I said. "You requested a conversation, and since your friends are dropping faster than snowflakes in Salzburg, I assumed you'd want it sooner than later." She stepped back, motioning me in. I entered a suite decorated like a chalet, stone fireplace, carved furniture, heavy drapes, all the atmospheric touches that make wealthy New Yorkers believe they've rented authenticity by the pound. But the air inside held something else too: fear. "Please," she said, sitting at a small table. "I must tell someone before I vanish like Helmut." "Missing, not necessarily dead," I corrected, though no one's betting on the distinction. Her hands twisted together. "I warned Adele. I told her not to get involved. She said she had insurance." "Insurance information," I said. Helena nodded. "She contacted me, said she had something that could protect us if the circle came under scrutiny. She asked if I wanted a copy for my own safety." "And did you?" "No." Her voice cracked. "I told her to destroy it." "That's interesting," I said, "because right before she died, Adele mailed something to Nero Wolfe, something very much not destroyed." She went pale. "The ledger?" "Bingo." Her breath trembled. "I didn't know she would. Oh, God. I thought she would keep quiet." "And Helmut Rayner?" "I haven't seen him since yesterday morning." "Before or after Marston keeled over?" She winced. "After." That lined up disturbingly well. I shifted my weight, watching her carefully. "Mrs. Vorberg, have you been threatened?" Her eyes flicked to the window. "Not directly." "Indirectly?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Someone left a note under my door. No signature, only initials." I leaned forward. "What initials?" Her lips parted, but closed again. "I burned it." "That's convenient," I said. Her chin lifted. I was frightened. "Of whom? Stroltz?" Her gaze darted away. "He's a bully, a brute. He always hated Adele." "That's a very tidy accusation," I said, "almost too tidy." Something flickered behind her eyes. Anger, guilt, hard to say, but it didn't read like spontaneous truth. On her writing desk sat a cheap notepad, the kind hotels leave for guests. I stepped closer. "Mind if I look?" She hesitated. "I wrote nothing important." "Good," I said. "Then you won't mind." I angled the pad under the light. The faintest indentations, letters pressed by a pen on a sheet that had since been torn off, showed themselves. MVC. The same initials haunting this case like a ghost with poor penmanship. I turned, holding the pad. "Care to explain?" She clutched her elbows. "I didn't write that." "Then who did?" "I don't know." Her fear was real, but there was something staged too, like she'd practiced being terrified in front of a mirror. I replaced the pad carefully, no evidence removal, Wolfe's rules, and gave her a level look. "Mrs. Vorberg, you're in danger whether you admit it or not. If you know anything about that ledger, anything at all, you'd better tell me." She shook her head violently. "No, I want no part of this. Please go." "That's not how this works." Her voice rose. "Please go." Outside the door, as promised, Saul stood alert, his eyebrow raised. "Well?" "She's scared," I said, "but also playing scared, and her writing pad is humming the same three-letter tune." "MVC," Saul murmured. "Yep, tune of the week." "I'll watch her," he said. I left him to it. Back at the brownstone at 1:03 p.m., 3 minutes late for lunch, which Wolfe mentally logged as rebellion, I found him in the office with the ledger open and 5 note cards arranged like suspects in a police lineup. "You disobeyed," Wolfe said without looking up. "Of course," I said, but politely. He finally raised his eyes. "Report." I gave him the full play-by-play. Saul's intel, Helena's act, the missing Rayner, the writing pad, the initials. Wolfe's face tightened at that. "I examined the ledger thoroughly," he said. "The initials MVC are not a person. They are a code." "For what?" a financial transaction category, likely involving currency conversion or overseas accounts. And a killer crossing names off like unpaid invoices, I said. Yes, Wolfe growled. Someone with access to both funds and fear. He thumped the desk. Confound it, Archie. Going to that hotel was reckless. I shrugged. It wasn't reckless, it was stylishly dangerous. Phooey. He glared until the corner of my mouth tugged upward, and then he relented with a microscopic nod, the Wolfe equivalent of patting me on the head and giving me a lollipop. At 1:31 the phone rang. I answered. Goodwin, Kramer's voice grunted, not angrily, just tired. Put Wolfe on. Wolfe extended a hand. I placed the receiver in it. Yes, Inspector. A pause. So, Wolfe replied, you have spoken to Helena Vorberg. Another pause. Yes, of course the pattern holds. No, Inspector, I am not concealing anything. I repeat, not concealing anything. Pause. You will have my opinion when I am prepared to give it. Another pause. Very well. Good day. He handed the phone back. What was that? I asked. Kramer is uneasy, Wolfe said. He suspects Helena is either the next target or the cause of the danger. Which do you think? Wolfe's lips pressed together. Both are possible. And the initials? He tapped the ledger. Coded transactions, linked entries, significant only in combination. We must keep tracing the chain. And Rayner? Find him, Wolfe said, at once, discreetly. Fritz appeared in the doorway just then, announcing dinner preparations with a soft throat clearing, the brownstone's way of signalling the scene's curtain drop. I rose. Wolfe leaned back, hands folded, eyes half-lidded. Archie, I trust you. It came out clipped, reluctant, but unmistakably sincere. Don't say things like that, I replied. I might start behaving responsibly. Phooey. And with that, Wolfe brooding, Fritz politely waiting, orchids looming in their next hour, the circle tightened around all of us. At 9:27 the next morning, I found myself trudging through a dusty little block near the Hudson docks, where metal shutters, rusted signs, and questionable footprints gave the scenery all the charm of a forgotten filing cabinet. It was the kind of place where every second doorway promised either discount textiles or unsupervised smuggling, which is to say, it was perfect for locating one Matthias Vogel-Koenig, the man whose initials had danced through the case like a ghost with a secret bank account. Saul Pantzer, naturally, had unearthed him. I'd asked Saul how he found a man who didn't want to be found. He shrugged and said, he ordered the same brand of Austrian coffee for years. People keep habits. Saul's genius came in quiet packages, but it always arrived on time. The import office was squeezed between a shuttered fishmonger and a fabric warehouse whose windows hadn't been washed since the Roosevelt administration. The doors peeling paint looked exhausted. I knocked. A thin voice called, Yes? Who is there? Archie Goodwin, I said. I'm looking for Mr. Matthias Vogel. A scrape, a click, and the door opened 2 inches, the official New York measurement of mistrust. A narrow face appeared behind the gap, greying hair, spectacles perched on a nose that had seen too many winters, and eyes holding enough tension to wire a radio set without batteries. I am Vogel, he said. What do you want? Conversation, I said, preferably indoors. Reluctantly, he opened the door wider. The office inside looked like a supply closet rented by anxiety. Stacks of ledgers climbed toward the ceiling in precarious piles, dust layered everything like icing sugar, and a battered desk sat in the corner like it regretted ever being assembled. Vogel pointed at a chair. Sit, but I know nothing anymore. Not about them, not about anything. That's a promising start, I said. I prefer subjects who confess fear before they confess details. His hands fidgeted. I do not want trouble. You had trouble the moment you joined the Alpine Circle, I said. He stiffened. No, I handled accounts. Only accounts. That's more than enough, I told him. We have the ledger. Your ledger. His face drained. Completely. The colour left his cheeks as though the very air had been sucked out of the room. If I'd needed proof he was our man, that reaction would have qualified for notarization. His fear was as palpable as the dust in the air. He knew what the ledger meant, and now he was caught in its shadow. No, he whispered. Impossible. It was lost, destroyed. I told them to destroy it. They didn't, I said, and Adele Rassner mailed it to us before she died. His fingers curled over the edge of the desk. She should have left. She knew too much. Marston knew too much, I said. Now he's dead. Adele knew too much. Now she's dead, and the names in the ledger have red pencil slashes through them. Your initials, MVC, appear next to a coded entry. Care to comment? He shook his head violently. Those initials are not me. They are for transactions. Convenient that your name matches the code. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again, like he was auditioning for a role as a startled fish. I swear, Mr. Goodwin, I never touched that ledger again. Never. I reached into my breast pocket and removed the photostat Wolfe had made. I placed it on the desk. Vogel approached it as though it were radioactive. No, he whispered. No, this cannot be. I'd wager Stroltz disagrees, I said. Speaking of which, he threatened you, didn't he, years ago? He sagged into his chair. He said, if I ever spoke, if I ever resurfaced, he would see to it that I vanished. Rayner's already vanished, I said. He might have beaten you to it. Vogel closed his eyes. They are cleaning house. That's one way to put it, I said. Another is, someone is working through that ledger like a to-do list. Before Vogel could respond, a sharp sound cut through the office, a faint crunch outside, followed by the smallest shift in air pressure. I know that sound. Anyone in my business knows it. I turned just as the window behind me shattered. As we reviewed the ledgers in Vogel's cramped office, a sudden crack of glass split the air. A bullet tore through the room in a narrow whistle, shredding paper, cracking wood, and slicing a line across Vogel's shoulder. He screamed. I ducked low, diving toward him. Get down! He collapsed beside the desk, clutching his arm. Blood seeped through his fingers, bright and alarming. Another shot shattered a second pane, but too high this time. The shooter was adjusting. I grabbed Vogel's collar and dragged him behind a tower of unopened crates. Stay put, I ordered, and stop bleeding so enthusiastically. He whimpered, which was fair. Peering over the crate, I saw only shards of glass and dust drifting like guilty snowfall. Whoever fired those rounds had the angle and distance planned. The shots had come from the opposite building, an abandoned warehouse with enough grime to conceal the entire Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra if it wished. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police, probably a concerned citizen or possibly a nervous smuggler hoping to redirect official attention. Can you walk? I asked Vogel. I think so, he gasped. Let's find out. I hauled him up. He swayed but stayed upright, barely, and together we hobbled outside just as an ambulance screeched to the curb. Pearlie Stebbins climbed out of the trailing police car, glaring at me like I'd personally invited the shooter. What the hell happened, Goodwin? Target practice, I said. The target being my friend here. He's not your friend, Stebbins grunted. Then I'm charging him cab fare, I said. The medics whisked Vogel inside the ambulance. Pearlie jotted notes, muttering about trouble magnets and paperwork. I left him to it. Back at the brownstone at 11:56, 4 minutes before the lunch bell, Wolfe sat in the office amid ledger pages, maps, and more note cards than would be used in a spelling bee championship. He looked up when I entered, saw the dried blood on my sleeve, and his eyebrows slammed together like two freight trains meeting by accident. Archie, what? I didn't do it, I said immediately, though the bullet almost did me. What bullet? He demanded. I told him. Every detail. Vogel's panic, Vogel's confession, the initials, the gunshot, the wound. Wolfe listened in stony silence, jaw-locked, hands gripping his chair arms like he intended to strangle them. Finally, he spoke. You will not leave this brownstone again until I say otherwise. That's a harsh sentence, I said. Can I at least have visitation rights through the front window? Archie. His voice dropped to the low, dangerous register that suggested he might actually feel something resembling concern. You have been fired upon. And missed, I said cheerfully, which speaks well of my exercise routine. Phooey. He slammed his palm on the desk. You are reckless. And alive, I said. Matthias Vogel can say the same, thanks to me. Wolfe breathed deeply, his irritation leaking into the floorboards. The bullet, did you see it? The casing? No, but Stebbins said it's from a European-manufactured pistol popular among the inn's clientele. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Of course, the circle. Looks like it, I said. Someone wants Vogel quiet. Someone, Wolfe muttered, is labouring desperately to prevent us from seeing the pattern. The phone rang at 12:04, cutting through the quiet, a sound that always seems to herald change. I answered, bracing myself. Goodwin speaking. Archie, Lon Cohen's voice crackled through. Tell Wolfe the Gazette is running a piece at 3. The headline's not flattering. Define not flattering. Suggesting he's obstructing justice by keeping the ledger. I winced. That'll ruin his afternoon beer. Tell him to comment if he wants balance, Lon said, urgency sharpening his tone. Clock's ticking. I relayed the message. Wolfe's face turned a shade darker than the cordovan leather of his chair. Insolent wretches. The press or the killers? Both. I sat on the edge of the desk. Look at it this way. You're famous again. Phooey! He yanked the bell cord with enough force to frighten the mechanism. Fritz appeared instantly. Lunch, Wolfe commanded. The bell, the food, the ritual, those were his anchors. And today he needed anchoring. I watched him settle, gather himself, and begin mentally reassembling the case. The bullets, the ledger, the initials, the wounded accountant, the tightening circle. Someone was getting desperate. And when killers get desperate, that's when Nero Wolfe stops tolerating interference. If there's one thing I've learned working for Nero Wolfe, it's that nothing says good morning like being sent out to track down half a dozen nervous Europeans and convince them to attend a meeting they definitely don't want to attend. So, at 10:14 a.m., after Wolfe finished his orchid hours and delivered his marching orders, I headed into Manhattan with a pocket full of Wolfe's engraved invitations and the cheerful knowledge that at least one of the recipients might be a murderer. The invitations themselves were masterpieces of Wolfean diplomacy, short, formal, and terrifyingly grand. You are requested to attend a final conference at my residence regarding the matter presently under scrutiny. Resolution and exoneration shall be afforded. If that didn't lure them in, nothing would. I returned to the brownstone by 2:03 p.m., having delivered every invitation except to Helmut Reiner, still missing, presumed hiding, or possibly being used as ballast somewhere in the East River. Strolz had read the card and turned so red I expected him to combust. Helena Vorberg had looked like she might faint. The hotel staff mostly looked like they wanted to call their mothers. Inside, Kramer was waiting in the office like a pressure cooker wearing a cigar. "Wolfe," he barked when I walked in, "if you're staging a circus, the NYPD is sitting ringside." Wolfe, ensconced behind his desk, gave Kramer a look that could chill scalding water. "Inspector, I will tolerate your presence briefly. You may stand in the office. Mr. Stebbins may supervise the door, but you will not interfere." "You think I'm letting you run this solo?" Kramer shot back. "Someone in that group is a murderer, maybe more than one." Wolfe folded his hands. "That is precisely why I insist on maintaining order." I stepped between them diplomatically. "Gentlemen, if you both start bellowing now, we won't have any air left before our guests arrive." "Shut up, Goodwin," Kramer growled. Wolfe glared at him. "You will speak civilly to Mr. Goodwin." Kramer rolled his eyes so hard they almost rattled. "Fine, fine." At 3:01 p.m. the bell rang. Fritz appeared, immaculate as ever. "Guests, sir." The conference began. Strolz entered first, barging into the office like a man prepared to strangle the nearest witness. Helena followed, trembling so dramatically that even the carved owl on Wolfe's bookshelf seemed pitying. Behind them came 3 members of the staff, waitress, night clerk, bellhop, each wearing expressions ranging from dread to confusion. Pearly Stebbins planted himself by the door, arms folded, jaw clenched. Kramer took position near the bookshelves, giving Wolfe a long, warning look that basically said, "Don't blow this." Wolfe remained seated, dominating the room without rising. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We are here to conclude this matter." Strolz sneered. "You conclude and what? Decide guilt? You are not police." "No," Wolfe said calmly, "but I am the one in possession of the facts you have all attempted to hide." The silence thickened like Fritz's best gravy. Wolfe opened the ledger on his desk. "This book chronicles your dealings, legal and otherwise. Some names have been crossed out. Mr. Marston, Miss Rassner." His gaze sharpened. "And others." Helena shuddered. I stepped back behind Wolfe as instructed. his way of keeping me out of a potential line of fire. Protectiveness wrapped in authoritarian packaging. Wolfe went on. Someone in this room believed eliminating individuals tied to this ledger would erase danger. Instead, it magnified it. The night clerk fainted, fully collapsed, arms limp, onto the rug. It would have been funny if we weren't dealing with murder. Wolfe ignored him completely. I will ask questions. You will answer. Lying will worsen your position. Stroltz snorted. I know nothing. Wolfe lifted a single eyebrow. Mr. Stroltz, your temper is exceeded only by your lack of subtlety. You threatened Matthias Vogel years ago. Stroltz stiffened, but didn't deny it. Helena wrung her hands. You don't understand. Adele wanted insurance. Insurance, Wolfe interrupted. Curious word, especially coming from someone who should not know Adele used it. She froze. Her eyes darted toward me, then the ledger. Too late. Wolfe leaned forward. Furthermore, the initials MVC appear throughout this ledger. They refer to coded transactions, not individuals. Yet when I mentioned them, before saying Mr. Vogel's name, you reacted. Her breath hitched. I noted it silently, as Wolfe had signaled. That reaction, Wolfe said, is telling. Stroltz stepped forward aggressively. She lies. She has always lied. Sit, Wolfe ordered. Stroltz sat. In a different life he might have made a decent sheepdog. Kramer cleared his throat. Wolfe, if you have something, spit it out. Otherwise I'm hauling every one of them to the precinct. Wolfe shot him a look. Inspector, patience. We are nearly there. He turned to Helena again. Madam, you knew Adele had information that could condemn the Alpine Circle. You also knew she mailed something before she died. That frightened you. She bit her lip. Yes, I was afraid. Afraid enough, Wolfe said, to attempt retrieving that parcel before it reached me. Her face drained. Wolfe let the silence stretch. You visited the post office the morning the parcel arrived. The clerk remembers a woman matching your description. You asked if any mail from the Tyrolean Inn had been processed. When told yes, you fled. Stroltz hissed. So she is the murderer. No, Wolfe said flatly. Stroltz blinked. Helena looked like she might collapse. Wolfe's voice cooled another 10 degrees. Mrs. Vorburg panicked because she feared the truth. To protect herself, she wielded the weapon that struck Mr. Marston and killed Miss Rassner. Kramer folded his arms. Then who did? Wolfe shifted his eyes to the staff. The night clerk fainted not from shock. He fainted because he recognized that the ledger we possess is not the only one. The night clerk groaned, regaining consciousness just in time to hear that. Wolfe continued. A second ledger, a duplicate maintained abroad, records withdrawals after your arrival in New York. Withdrawals made by someone intelligent enough to handle accounts, frightened enough to erase associates, and foolish enough to believe coded initials would conceal their hand. My pulse tightened. Wolfe was building to it. Matthias Vogel Koenig kept the original system. He disappeared, conveniently, a frightened man fleeing guilt. Helena gasped. Vogel? But he was shot. Not killed, Wolfe said, wounded, jittery, and in the moments of our conversation he slipped, referring to transactions he should not have known were still active. He lied when he said he never touched the ledger again. I felt the click, the neat, awful click. Wolfe finished. Mr. Vogel is not the killer, Wolfe said sharply. He is a frightened bookkeeper, manipulated and nearly silenced, but he is no murderer. The room erupted. Helena sobbing, Stroltz shouting, the staff buzzing like hornets. Kramer swore. Stebbins stepped forward. You're assuming the little guy in the hospital is our killer, Stebbins said. No, Wolfe said. But you will find the weapon hidden in his office, put there to incriminate him. Kramer stared at Wolfe, jaw working. Then, remarkably, he said, All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report. I couldn't resist. Anyone need earplugs? The avalanche just started. Wolfe shot me a look, but it wasn't murderous. More like tolerably annoyed, which, between us, passes for affection. And that's when Wolfe stood, slowly, powerfully. I have identified the murderer. The brownstone office had hosted its fair share of theatrics over the years, but at 3:59 p.m. that afternoon, It felt more like a courtroom built out of walnut and stubbornness. Wolfe sat behind his desk like a judge who charged by the minute. Kramer occupied the chair nearest the bookshelves, arms folded, cigar unlit but chewing marks deepening. Pearlie Stebbins guarded the door with the professional menace of a man trying to intimidate the wallpaper into cooperating. Helena Vorburg stood in the center of the room, her expensive grey suit immaculate, her poise intact, except for the eyes. They flicked around like searchlights, looking for an escape route that wasn't there. Wolfe opened with no preamble. "Mrs. Vorburg, sit." She remained standing. "I prefer—" "Sit," Wolfe repeated. She sat. Stroltz sat on the sofa, muttering Austrian threats under his breath, which didn't improve the air quality. The surviving hotel staff clustered behind him, pale and shaking as though they expected the furniture to testify next. Wolfe folded his hands. "We shall begin." I took my station behind him, not because I'm shy, but because Wolfe had quietly instructed me earlier, "Stand behind me, out of the line of danger." It was his version of affection, delivered with the tenderness of a tax audit. Wolfe spoke. "We are here to resolve the matter of Miss Adele Rassner's murder, and Mr. Victor Marston's, and the attempted murder of Matthias Vogel-Koenig." Helena stiffened at Vogel's full name. Wolfe caught it instantly. "Yes, Mr. Vogel, the man you attempted to frame." A ripple moved through the room. Stroltz snorted. "Bah! Vogel is a rat." Wolfe silenced him with a single raised finger. "You will remain quiet." Stroltz obeyed. Miracles happen. Wolfe nodded to me. I stepped forward and placed the Tyrolean wrapped ledger on the desk. "This book," Wolfe said, "is the fulcrum of this affair. It contains the Circle's clandestine accounts. Miss Rassner discovered discrepancies, entries falsified, funds siphoned, transactions modified. She confronted the one person with access to both the accounts and the authority to manipulate them." Helena swallowed. "Adele discovered," Wolfe continued, "that someone within the Alpine Circle was embezzling, quietly, steadily, for years." Kramer leaned forward. "Name." Wolfe's gaze didn't waver. "Helena Vorburg." The room detonated. Gasps, shouts, Stroltz attempting to rise before Stebbins barked him down. Helena's face, however, remained eerily composed. "That's absurd," she said. "I am not an accountant." "No," Wolfe agreed, "but your late husband was. You learned. You continued. And when the Circle trusted you with partial oversight—" "They did not trust me," Helena snapped. "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "they trusted you far too much." He reached for a note card. "Clue 1. You were the only person with unrestricted access to Adele Rassner's room the night before her death." "That's a lie," she whispered. "A fact," Wolfe corrected. "You visited her under the guise of concern. She showed you evidence of your theft. You killed her, and staged the blow to appear accidental." Silence thickened. Wolfe picked up the ledger. "Clue 2. You tried to buy the ledger from Adele. She refused. You sought to intercept the parcel at the post office the morning after her death. You failed." Her breath trembled. "Clue 3, Wolfe said. Your reaction to the initials MVC. You recognized them before I mentioned Vogel's name, because you wrote them, not as his initials, but as your code to cast suspicion upon him." Kramer shot up. "What?" Wolfe nodded. "She attempted to misdirect. She hoped the police would conclude Vogel had returned to settle scores. She even hired a gunman to fire into Vogel's office, non-fatal, so the police would assume a larger conspiracy." Helena's composure cracked. "That's not—" "Phooey," Wolfe said, with rare venom. "Clue 4. The poison used to kill Victor Marston was found in your suite. A specific compound imported from Europe, familiar to you, given your husband's pharmaceutical work." Stroltz lurched to his feet. "You killed Marston?" Helena rounded on him. "He would have exposed me. He threatened. He said—" "He said he knew," Wolfe finished. "He had pieced together the irregularities, and you silenced him." A pin could have dropped, filed a complaint, and received a permit. Wolfe leaned forward, his voice cold as ice. "Mrs. Vorburg, your motive was greed. Your method was cunning. Your downfall was arrogance. The belief you could manipulate codes, ledgers, initials, and lives without consequence." Her breath hitched. She wanted to argue, but the weight of Wolfe's words crushed any defense. Helena's eyes blazed. You pompous! She bolted. I started forward, but Stebbins was faster. He slammed her against the doorframe with enough force to knock the Alpine nostalgia out of her. She struggled once, then froze as he slapped cuffs on her. Kramer strode over, jaw set. "Helena Vorberg," he said, voice low and lethal. "You're under arrest for the murders of Adele Rassner and Victor Marston, and the attempted murder of Matthias Vogel-Koenig." She sagged. "You don't understand. I only wanted—" "No," Kramer said. "Save it." Stebbins hauled her out, Stroltz sputtering behind them. Hotel staff followed in stunned procession. The room emptied slowly until only Wolfe, Kramer, and I remained. Kramer turned to Wolfe. "I'll say this once. Good work." Wolfe inclined his head. "Thank you, Inspector." It was the closest thing those two have to a hug. Kramer pocketed a note card. "I'll file the statement. And, Wolfe, next time you stage a meeting like this, warn me." "I would have," Wolfe said, "but I assumed you'd arrive uninvited." Kramer grunted. "Fair." He left without slamming the door. For a moment, quiet settled. Thick, warm, as if the whole house exhaled. Wolfe let out his own breath, long and weary. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Beer." "Coming up." But Fritz was already at the door. "Dinner in 10 minutes, sir." Wolfe nodded regally. "Thank you, Fritz." I leaned against the desk. "So, another charming example of the Alpine tourism industry." Wolfe gave me a look. "Archie, spare me." "Sure, but I was thinking, after all this Tyrolean excitement, maybe we should take a vacation in Austria." "Never," Wolfe said with absolute finality. I grinned. "Thought so." He glared, which only meant he wasn't genuinely angry. Then, in a voice softer than the leather of his chair, Wolfe said, "Archie, your exertions today were indispensable." That, from him, was a declaration of undying affection. "Well," I said, "I try." "Try less," Wolfe muttered, closing his eyes. And just as the peace settled, the phone rang.